All right. Now we've got on board one of our favorites going back a number of years here. This guy, always great conversation on college football. Will Gunter, the all new early game, 1075, the game there in Columbia, South Carolina. Will, how's it going tonight?
It's going. We've coached up some soccer, fixed a little dinner, and I'll have to flip some hockey on in a minute. I think it's Capitals Bruins night on NBCSN. So big night over here.
Will, I did not peg you as a hockey guy.
You got to get into. I mean, it's been a college basketball. I'm a college basketball guy, and you know what? This is the weird year where I've learned that without fans, when you don't have the Cameron crazies or you don't have fans at basketball games, college basketball is tough to watch, man. And people don't understand. A lot of my background came from working with ESPN and doing basketball recruiting and both ranking and then working with 24/7 Sports. And I love college basketball. I know a lot of those guys still, and it's been impossible. It's really hard. I'm the least fired up for conference tournament time and for March Madness that I've been in a long time, and that kind of stinks. I hate that. Am pretty excited, however, for college football for the start of spring ball and obviously the news that Alabama, not just Alabama, but the SEC is kind of planning on full capacity stadiums. I know we got a long way to go, and we don't need to make this a political discussion, but I believe that's going to happen, and I think that we're going to have a terrific 2021 football season with that'll kick off here, just up the road in Charlotte. Georgia and Clemson will highlight that weekend with a lot of other games.
Yeah, that's right in your neck of the woods. And unless something changes, that is the game of the non-conference slate in college football. And that may turn out to be the game in college football this year. So I got to think around those parts, they're already talking that one up.
Yeah, I mean, it's 365 days a year around here, and obviously Georgia's trying to win a national championship. Hadn't done it since 1980, and Clemson will replace Trevor Lawrence with DJ, as I call him, because my English is bad enough without trying to say his last name. And so you get that game, and it's a big game, honestly, for Clemson with the way things have kind of evolved over the last 12 months and some of the losses that they're going to sustain when you talk about Travis Etienne and they lose a guy yesterday, Darion Kendrick, a defensive back. I think it was yesterday, maybe Monday. My days are running together. But it's a huge game. And I like Georgia, JT Daniels. I personally, being a South Carolina fan and covering South Carolina, got to see him at the end of the season and what he had developed into. And he's going to have some weapons to work with, obviously, in the backfield and at George Pickens at wide receiver. You can always count on Georgia having a good offensive line. We'll see how the defense looks there next year, but kind of a fan of that right now. That game, you got LSU, UCLA that weekend, so that'll be a lot of fun. I think it's Miami, Alabama, which is a throwback game for me personally. I'm a big fan of that. So we got a good opening weekend of college football that we can all kind of look forward to if we blink, not too far away.
Yeah, Georgia's kind of my off-season champ right now. I've been looking at Georgia football, had some Georgia people on here. We've been running down the roster, running down the position units, and they're just loaded. Like they didn't even lose much. Like they usually lose the NFL team, but then they replace it with the other NFL team. Well, they only lost a couple of those guys this time. They're really just bringing almost everybody back, especially on offense. So they're going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see JT Daniels if he's just a good quarterback or if he can continue to develop and become like a guy that's going to lead a national championship kind of run.
Well, I mean, certainly, and now you've got Brock Vandergriff is coming in, and they're going to have plenty of quarterback competition there with the 5-star there in Vandergriff, and that should make it wildly interesting. JT Daniels is going to be pushed, but the way he played at the end of last year, I think a lot of us thought that when he committed, as long as he was eligible, he'd be the guy from the get-go, and obviously then Jamie Newman opted out, and we really thought he would be the guy, and obviously they went with Dewan Mathis, and then went with DeJuan Mathis, and then somebody decided Stetson Bennett was the guy they should go to, and things kind of floundered around for a little while. But Daniels played well at the end of the year, and it's going to be interesting. I see tonight you got some Gators on the line, and look, that's a program that I'm fascinated to see in the SEC East this year with Emory Jones and with Dan Mullen, who. I mean, what a year for Dan Mullen. I mean, just keep winning. Nobody cares. Nobody cares how you act. Nobody cares if you show up to – I like Dan Mullen. I always thought Dan Mullen at Mississippi State was probably the second best coach in the SEC, given what he was working with at Mississippi State. But I'm fascinated to see Emory Jones and what they look like. Obviously, the loss of Eric Gilbert this past week. We'll see if he ends up in college or junior college based on maybe some things I've heard. That wasn't Dan Mullen's fault, but the bottom line is around here we got some good games that we can start to talk about and look forward to in what I expect to be an actual college football season where we all get back into stadiums together and celebrate our team and enjoy the pageantry that is college football.
Will, the more you talk, the more I think we could just camp out in the SEC Eastern Division because there's storylines all over the place. It's a soap opera there. Yeah, Tennessee, in and of themselves, is just a mess. We'll see if they got the right AD and the right coach, but they've been making bad hires ever since Phil Fulmer stepped down or was fired. So that's been an issue. South Carolina, I had David Waters from Gators Breakdown on a few minutes ago because I've always had the thought about South Carolina as, okay, looking over the course of decades, why does this program, and when I say never, of course it's not never, but never win. Well, I can't think of another program in the country, Will, that has as rabid a fan base, resources, and recruiting. They got football players, within 300 to 500 miles of them, and that they can't win.
You know what? It's crazy. I can explain it in a couple different ways. One, keep making bad hires, and it's hard to win football games. When you hire Will Muschamp, that explains a lot. I think part of it though, college football, in my opinion, and it's not set in stone, but did you ever watch the documentary on the SEC Network, Saturdays in the South? Phenomenal documentary. But it talked about traditions and history dating back to the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the hiring of Vince Dooley at Georgia and Pat Dye at Auburn. It talked about even Steve Spurrier going to play at Florida, and then Florida obviously developing into what they were under Steve Spurrier. It talked about Bear Bryant. It even talked about great moments for Kentucky and Mississippi State and I forget his name. I apologize for Tennessee. Conridge. I want to say Thompson, but I know that's not right. But it talked about all these moments, and South Carolina doesn't have that history, and I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult in 2020 to take a program that's nothing and turn it into something. And South Carolina's fighting that. We'll see if Shane Beamer, a young guy, a guy that exudes a lot of energy in a lot of ways, kind of reminds me of Dabo Swinney. Now, can he get the program going in that fashion? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But the energy, the charisma, that's a lot of things. I like the person there's what is that? A Bama fan told me Pat Dye was paying players. Buddy Rowe, the SEC, the whole business is paying players. It's not just, it wasn't just Auburn. It's everybody. And go back and watch that documentary again if you haven't. Go back and watch Saturdays in the South. I think it explains a lot of things about the SEC and where it's at. But it also explains, I think, how difficult it is for a program like South Carolina, who 24/7 Sports just put out has one of the top 5 facilities in the country. It's tough, man. It's tough. You've got to be able to build a program with tradition, with history, and there certainly that lacks at South Carolina. You mentioned Tennessee. I'm fascinated to see Tennessee. Josh Heupel, that was not the guy that I thought they'd hire. I thought they'd be able to go a little bit bigger than that. We'll see how he works out in the SEC. I'm not sold on Tennessee. I mean, Mark, you talk about the SEC East. How incredible is it that probably the second most stable program in the SEC behind Georgia is Kentucky. Now, I'm not saying they're the second best program. I'm just saying with Mark Stoops, the tenure he's been there, you see how he's developed that program. We'll still see a lot about what happens with Florida this coming year as they transition from Kyle Trask to Emory Jones. Remember, Florida's losing to Kentucky up in Lexington 2 years ago, and Felipe Franks gets hurt. And they probably lose that game. If they lose that game to Kentucky and Felipe Franks stays on as quarterback, what's our discussion about Dan Mullen here on March of 2021?
Exactly. It's quite a bit different, or maybe it's non-existent. But yeah, to top off the storylines, we talk about the drama, and you took us through it. But Dan Mullen, to me, if we were sitting here a year ago, I'm defending Dan Mullen. I had people come on here and go crazy about Dan Mullen. What has he ever won? And I'm like, well, look at what he's doing at Florida. He's building a winner. They're getting better by the year. Look at what he did at Mississippi State. Sure, he's a little quirky. He says some things that are a little bit of oddball, but it's all harmless. Well, this is the first year that it wasn't harmless. It was buffoonery at times.
You know, I think what's interesting with Dan Mullen is you already saw it this year where he's pulling the same stunt he pulled at Mississippi State, but now it's the NFL. Well, my name's in place for the Falcons. My name's in place for the Jets. You can't do that at Florida, not when you're competing against some of the schools that you've got to compete against to recruit. You can't have your name constantly floated out for other jobs. Keeping Todd Grantham, I think is obviously very interesting. Look, I'm a huge Torian Gray fan. He came to South Carolina. He's already landed South Carolina a pretty good defensive back recruit out of Hallandale, Florida, and Anthony Rose. He had him in the game for Sam McCall, who obviously just committed to Florida State this past weekend or the end of last week. I really like Torian Gray, but he keeps Todd Grantham, gets rid of Ron English and Torian Gray. And I think that defense is going to continue to be fascinating to watch. Dan Mullen's shown what he can do with offenses at Mississippi State, and now he's landing better players at Florida. So I think the offense will continue to be dynamic. The question is what does that defense looks like as we continue down that path if it's Todd Grantham leading the way?